Hello everyone, welcome back to the series of Pandas. In this video we will discuss on reindexing and altering labels. So whenever we create a data frame object, it gets its row name and column name automatically. But sometimes we are not satisfied with the row and column labels that we get from the data frame. So in order to change or manipulate those row names or column names, there are few functions available in Python Pandas. We can use those functionality in order to change those names. So in this video we will learn about those functions. So let's get started with rename method, a method that simply renames the index or column labels in a data frame. So through this method we can simply rename the index labels or the column name using rename function on the method. So this is the basic syntax of the rename method. As you can see, we have to use the data frame object along with the dot notation and the function name. So we can use either of those syntax. We can use this syntax or also we can use this syntax. Both of the syntax are same. If we consider this first syntax, we can see that the first element that is being passed in this first syntax is mapper. So we need not to get confused with this mapper. Mapper is basically the mapped values. So a dictionary is basically a very good example of mapper. The second parameter that it accepts is basically the access. So by default the access is set to none, and the third is in place. We've already discussed about access and in place in my previous video. So if we consider the second syntax, we can see that the second syntax takes in the three parameters. The first parameter which it takes is index, and the second one is column, and the third one is in place. So we already know about index, column and in place. So in order to understand this rename, let us go through an example. So as I said, rename is used to rename the column labels or the index labels. So in my case I have the following column names, that is classes, country, quarter and tutor, and I have the following index labels. Now let's say if I have a scenario where I need to change the column name of classes to CF. So what I need to do, I need to use that rename method or the rename function. So let us try to rename this classes to CF. Here basically I will use the concept of mapper, that is key value pair mapping. I will use the original column name and I will map it to the new column name. Now let us try to execute this code. So the original column had classes. Now let us try to see the output. You can see the output, the column name classes got changed to CF. So this way we can change the multiple column names using a comma. So I hope the concept of rename is clear. Now let us try to move ahead to the next method. Now the next method that we have is Reindex. So if you try to go through the formal definition of Reindex, we can say that a method that specifies the new order of the existing column or the existing index is basically reindexing. Now reindex is used for those data frame where we need to change the position or the order of the particular column or the particular index values. So this is the basic syntax of reindex. Again, the data frame object dot notation and reindex function of the method. It accepts the following three parameters. The first parameter which it accepts is index, and the second parameter is columns, and the third parameter is fill value. So we will try to understand this with an example. So in reindexing we will go through three operations. First we will try to reorder the existing index using reindex function. And in second we will try to reorder as well as add or delete index labels, and in the third operation we will try to fill those values of the row and column that we have created. So let's get started with reordering the already existing indexes. Now let's say in this particular data frame I need to reorder the tutor and I need to bring the tutor to the first column. So in that case I need to shuffle the tutor to the first. So let us try to do that. Here again I will use the column parameter and I will pass the first element as tutor, and the second element that I will pass is classes, and the third element that I will pass is country, and the fourth as quarter. So this is basically the first parameter that I have passed. It is the column name. Since I am changing or altering the columns, that's why I have assigned the value to the columns. Now let us try to execute this code. It is still the rename function. Let us change it to reindex. Now let us try to execute this code. So we can see in the output we get the tutor as the first column, then classes, country and quarter. So this way we have reindexed or shuffled the columns. So we can also use the same concept to reindex the index name. For example, if I want to move the row with index 1 to the first row, that can also be done using reindex. Now let us move ahead to the next operation, that is reordering as well as adding or deleting index labels. As we can see that we have already reordered our columns. Now let's see if I need to add some columns more. Let's say Q1 and Q2 are the new columns. So that can also be done. We just need to use a comma and we have to pass those new column names. Let us try to execute this code. So as soon as I execute this code, this was our actual data frame and this is our manipulated data frame that we have. We already have our 4 existing columns including 2 new columns. since we have not passed any kind of values or we have not set any kind of values, this is set to NaN. So as you can see, we can reorder at the same time. So as you have seen, we can reorder those columns. At the same time, we can assign new columns to this particular data frame. So the same concept can also be applied in order to move or in order to delete the column. So the same concept can also be applied in order to delete the column. For example, in the new data frame that I have created, I need to shuffle the column that is tutor to first and classes to second. I just need these two columns and I don't need other columns. So that can be also done using this reindex. So let us try to understand that. So as you can see, this was our original data frame where we had 4 columns, and this is our manipulated data frame where we only have 2 columns. So this was all about reordering as well as adding or deleting index labels. So now let us try to fill the index labels or the values that we have newly created. So this is basically the third operation that we are going to perform. So in order to fill the values of the newly created column, we will use the fill_values property. So in order to fill the values, we will basically use the fill_values parameter. Let's say for all those newly created column, I need to fill it with 1000. Now let us try to execute this code. So as soon as I execute this code, you can see both the columns Q1 and Q2 gets filled with 1000. So this was all about reindexing. The similar way we can also add new index labels as we have done for the columns. We can also change or we can also delete the index labels. This can also be done using reindexing. I hope all these operations that are performed by reindex is clear. So now let us try to understand reindex_like. So this is our next function that we have, reindex_like, and this is the basic syntax of reindex_like function. So what does the function reindex_like does? The reindex_like function works on a data frame and reindexes its data as per as the argument data frame passes on it. So this particular parameter or the argument that is being passed, it will reindex as per as the argument data frame. So let us understand this scenario. I have 2 data frames, df1 and df2. So now let's say if I want to reindex the data frame df2 as per as the data frame df1, so for that we will be basically using the reindex_like function, and in this others we will basically pass that reference data frame. Now let us try to understand this reindex_like function with an example. Now let us try to create a dummy data frame. So this is our dummy data frame, that is df2. So let us print this data frame. So as soon as we print this data frame, we can see the output over here, and this is our actual data frame. Now let's say if I want to reindex this data frame on the basis of this data frame that we have over here, that is df2. That means the df data frame will take the reference of the df2 data frame. So in order to do that, we will basically use the reindex_like function. So what it will do, it will reindex the data frame df with the help of the data frame df2. So let us try to execute this code in order to understand this. So you can see the output. This is our newly reindexed data frame. This was the original data frame that we had, and this is our new reindexed data frame. So if you notice, the Q1 and Q2, here we don't have any values, although we had values in this data frame, that is df2, but for the data frame df we don't have any values. So why don't we have values for Q1 and Q2? The reason is because we didn't have any column in the data frame df. So this is the reason why we didn't have any values in the modified data frame which we have reindexed. So in a nutshell, if we want to understand the reindex_like function, so reindex, what it does, it will reindex the data frame df like the df2 data frame. So what it does, it will reindex like this data frame. Since we didn't have the column Q1 and Q2 in the original data frame df, that's why we didn't get the values for the reindexed data frame df. So this reindexing has been done on the reference of df2 data frame. That means in order to reindex this data frame df, it took the reference of df2 data frame. So thank you everyone for watching the videos. So this was all about the introduction to Python Pandas series. We will basically discuss on the PyPlot in the next series.